guys, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Nuns. Today we're studying 2 Chronicles chapter 24. Let's get started.
Okay, so whenever you read through chapter 24, this is one where if you could just take a black marker and you could draw a line through the very middle of this story and only tell the top half of the story, it would be one of the greatest. And then if you forgot that part and you just read the bottom half of the story, it is one of the worst. And so one guy could be both the best and the worst in one lifetime, and man, can things get out of control fast. So when they were good, they were very, very good, and when they were bad, they were very, very bad. That's what happens. And so the story is that Joash was 7 years old when he becomes king. Now, he's probably ruling as king with the high priest who has raised him. Remember, Joash was the son of the king who died, whose grandma killed everybody in the family so that she could rule. They took baby Joash, they put him in the temple, they hid him until it was time to bring him out and to restore him to be the king. Now, why is this important? This is an important story because remember who the throne of Israel or the throne of Judah belongs to. It always belongs to somebody who's coming from the line of King David. That was God's promise. And so when Athaliah, that was the wicked queen, when she killed everybody, all the Israelites must have thought that the reign of David, the line of David's sons was over. Little did they know there was a baby who was hiding and was going to grow up and was one day going to become the king. This is also why whenever Joash gets to be grown, he marries a couple of different ladies. You know, it wasn't weird for a king to have multiple wives, but the high priest found 2 wives for Joash, probably because he said, we need to have him have a lot of sons so that we can make sure that the line of David never fails and it always continues. I want you to notice whenever you read through this story how Joash was faithful to the Lord all the days where his mentor, his father figure was alive. But when he died, it got ugly fast. As a matter of fact, the worst part about this story to me is when God tries to rein Joash back in. He sends a prophet named Zechariah. Zechariah was the son of the high priest who raised Joash. Now, you think about it like this. If they're raised together by the same man, Joash is hiding in the temple and the high priest is working in the temple, do you think Joash knew Zechariah when they were growing up?
Probably.
They probably had dinner together. They probably grew up together. They were probably little boys together. And so when Joash kills him, he's not just betraying God by not listening to the prophet. He's not just betraying his surrogate father, the high priest who raised him. He's also betraying Zechariah, who was the kid that was raised with him, which is basically his brother. I mean, this is ugly, right? And so all of this story, I wrote down a couple of things here. I wrote how crazy it must have been. Like, what twisted in his mind to make him think all this was okay? Then I wrote down, we rarely treat people right when we're treating God wrong. Then, silencing God's prophets doesn't stop God's promises. And that sin affects our minds and our memories and our logic and our thinking. And sin makes us so sick in our soul, we do not think like ourselves. And so that's what I see in this story. Now, John, we had a couple of things we talked about. What were some things we talked about?
All right, so I got a little confused on 2 things. The first thing, it was just, so there were a lot of long J names in this, like Joash and stuff like that. And so I just kind of got those few confused, and it got a little weird. But then also I had the question of why were the people okay with killing Zechariah, but also then they're like, hold up, that's wrong, and then kill Joash.
Okay, so let's talk about this. The first thing you said was the names got confusing. So we got Joash, which we're probably not saying his name right, which makes us feel better because if you try to say the high priest's name right, it's Jehoiada or Jehoiada, or look, we're not saying his name right. So is it possible to get super confused about these names?
Yes.
Yes. Should you feel weird if you are super confused about these names? So what I had to do in my Bibles, what I showed you a few days ago, I had to get online and I just found a chart with all the names of the kings in order because all of these names end up sounding the same and I want to make sure I'm keeping that. So listen, whatever you got to do to just keep it mapped out in your brain, it's fine. All right. If you say their names wrong, are they going to get mad at you? Why?
Because nobody knows how to say their names.
And they're dead. Oh, yeah. So they're not going to be mad at all anyway.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And what was the next thing you said?
And then why would the people want to kill Zechariah, but then kill Joash for killing Zechariah?
Okay, yeah. So there was a lot of murder in this story. So Zechariah tried to preach, and Joash got mad and had him killed. And then everybody got mad at Joash later on, which, by the way, do you remember that story where it literally says, the army of the Syrians came with a small company of men and the Lord delivered a very great army into their hand. Okay, so here's what happens. A tiny army comes to fight Israel, who has a big army, and Israel's big army loses to a small army. So ever since the beginning, Israel has always been on the other side of these like miraculous victories where they were the little guy and they were beating the big guys. Well, now it's switched. Why? Sin. And now you got this group, they're ready to kill Zechariah and then they're ready to kill Joash. And why are they okay with this? And so that was the question. Here's what it is. When these folks were in the middle of their wickedness, nobody could trust nobody. I mean, sin is so ugly that it strips away just actual reasoning. That we do crazy things in sin. Can I tell you this? When crazy things happen in the world, sin is often at the root. When people do crazy things, sin is often at the root. When you hear crazy things going on in the world, sin is usually at the root. And so what's happening here is sin is at the root of this society. And this is how their leaders are acting. So if their leaders are acting this way, what do you think the average person in the average house in town is doing? Well, it's probably not good there either. And so when we read this, I want you to see, he started great, he ended terrible. Some start terrible and end great, but we ought to try to be good and faithful servants every single day from now to the day we meet our Lord face to face. We'll keep reading. We'll see you next week in chapter number 25. Bye.